This is the Jocko Underground podcast, number 10, with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
All right, so today we have some Q&A, some questions that are specifically from members of the Jocko Underground that are on board for the big win. And part of the reason we set up the JockoUnderground.com was so that we could hone down the number of people that submit questions and get to more of them. So that's what we're doing here. So, Echo Charles, what do we got? Let's get to it.
In the British Army, there has been a rise in right-wing views and support to the point where soldiers are being counseled and in a few cases sacked for their views.
That's fired. I will translate that from British.
Sacked, yeah. Hell yeah. As service members, when in uniform, we're supposed to be politically neutral. Is it impossible to maintain this position in today's climate?
Okay, so good question. And first of all, speaking of the American military, this idea that you can be an extremist of any kind is not okay. You're not allowed to. According to the Pentagon, military personnel must reject participation in organizations that espouse supremacist causes, attempt to create illegal discrimination based on race, creed, color, sex, religion, or national origin, advocate the use of force or violence, or otherwise engage in efforts to deprive individuals of their civil rights. So that's a very comprehensive list. That means you can't be basically in any kind of gang because you're not allowed to use force or violence. That's what gangs do. You're not allowed to. The one that's really a catch-all is deprive individuals of their civil rights. You know what that means? You committing crimes against anyone. So if you're part of a criminal gang, you're not allowed to be part of a criminal gang, and you're not allowed to be part of any kind of a supremacist organization. And you're not allowed to do that in the American military, and I'm sure it's the same in the British military. And guess what? Yeah, good. We don't want people in the military that we have to serve with that are criminals or associated with criminal gangs, or they're extremists, or they're racists. So, good. Right on. Now, it might just be the wording of your question, and I'm assuming that what you're talking about is more along the lines of sort of the cancel culture type situation that is going on in the world. And in some cases, people are being counseled or fired for things that are not wrong. And then that's different. So if, the way the question is worded is like, oh, there's been a rise of right-wing views. And if it's right-wing views, okay. But if it's right-wing extremist views or racist views, it's like, okay, well, yeah, you're not allowed to be in the military. You have the right to have those views, but you don't have the right to be in the military. Now, if it's like, oh, you have some conservative views and now people are getting counseled for it, and that's what we're talking about, yeah, okay, I get it. Or if you're a super liberal person and you have some beliefs that are a little bit outside what's normal and you're getting counseled for it, well, yeah, that's wrong. Now, I would say most of the cancel culture right now is aimed at conservative people. So this is what's happening not just in the military but in the whole world right now. And here's the thing. I just did an unraveling podcast about, well, it's not directly about this, but it's about an event that is reflective, I would say. So Daryl Cooper and I just did a podcast about the witch hunts in Salem, Massachusetts, and it's not, I don't think it's out yet. He's still editing, but there's also witch hunts throughout history, and many of them have the same kind of, it's a similar arc of the story. So here's what happened in Salem. I mean, you can listen to that podcast when it comes out, but the witch hunts in Salem were started by two little girls, one that was 9 and one that was 12. And what they figured out is they could get people in serious trouble by accusing them of being witches, by accusing them of bewitching. So they would act crazy and scream and yell and throw stuff around the room and then point at someone and say, that person possessed me. And actually the first person that they did it to was a slave that they had, this woman named, I think her name was Tituba. And they blamed her for their actions. And so she gets accused as a witch. And the little girls are like, who knows what they expected. But then all of a sudden they see that they have, what do they have? They have powerless little 9-year-old and 12-year-old girl. All of a sudden they have power. And then what happens? So it starts to expand. They start accusing other people. And by the way, and again, you can compare this to cancel culture. If you defend a witch, what are you?
Witch defender.
You're a witch too. You're a witch. No, you're a witch.
Straight up.
Yeah, you're a witch. So then it spreads. And then what happens is that the only way to be safe from being accused as a witch, do you know how do you defend yourself?
I have no idea.
Accuse other people of being a witch.
Oh, yeah.
You can see where this is going?
Yeah.
This is where the term witch hunt comes from. Gotcha. So this runs wild and it becomes a mob mentality. And that's what happened in Salem. And hundreds of people were imprisoned. 20 people were executed. Because of a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old. And actually what's crazy is other little girls got in on the act. Other little girls got in on the act. And this is what you have to remember about mobs. Mobs are very destructive, but they end up destroying themselves. So they're like this burning fire that they will burn themselves out. And that's what happened in Salem. The accusations kept going. And eventually they started accusing people that were either of a little bit more social power. Because let's face it, when they accused Tituba the slave, no one really cared, right? But then they started accusing non-slaves, and then they started accusing, they went up the social hierarchy. And eventually they got to a point where they were accusing people and they said, we're not listening to you. So they literally just started, shut up. Like they started ignoring the girls, and the girls, now that they weren't getting the attention anymore, guess what they did? They stopped doing it. And then everything settled down, and that was it. And it just kind of ended. It just kind of happened and ended. Now, it's scary because there was some serious damage. People were executed, but it ran its course, and that was that. Now, I would love to give you some advice, some, super hyper aggressive advice about stand your ground and you got to do this. But look, there's a mob happening. And when there's a mob happening, you have to recognize and understand that the mob is going to destroy itself. If you get wrapped up in the mob, you could get destroyed too. That is a little excerpt of what we are doing on the Jocko Underground podcast. So if you want to continue to listen, go to JockoUnderground.com and subscribe. And we're doing this to mitigate our reliance on external platforms so we are not subject to their control. And we're doing it so we can give you more control, more interaction, more direct connections, better communications with us, strengthen this legion of troopers that are in the game with us. So thank you. It's JockoUnderground.com. It costs $8.18 a month. And if you can't afford to support us, we can still support you. Just email assistance@JockoUnderground.com and we'll get you taken care of. Until then, we will see you mobilized underground.